a desirous, gaping heart.
Clive Barker's Hellraiser revival didn't just impress me for being an incredibly accurate representation of the Hellraiser franchise, but also has the potential to be a pretty rock-solid survival horror game.
We have such sights to show you.
Having played about 40 minutes of Clive Barker's Hellraiser revival, I have 4 big takeaways. 1, it checks all the most important boxes. It's got sex, it's got blood, and somebody even calls you a feces-covered pleasure monkey. So they're nailing it. Number 2, if I can best kind of paint a picture of what this game feels and plays like, it's like if Condemned was combined with Resident Evil Village, because it focuses a lot on melee combat, but then it also has this very whimsical fantasy horror element to it, as well as guns and inventory management. Number 3, the production value of this game is impressive. I don't think I've ever seen Hellraiser represented in this fidelity in any way in the movies, and that is for the better. It is cool to see this stuff kind of, come to life thanks to the Unreal 5 engine. And lastly, the game is so brutal, it is so graphic, that at my preview event, they had vomit bags, just in case you couldn't handle the sex, blood, and feces-covered pleasure monkey. So, starting from the top, Clive Barker's Hellraiser revival is a first-person, narrative-driven survival horror, which, for me, well, that's checking all the boxes because those are all things that I love to hear, but in an era where horror movie franchises are just, kind of being turned into video games, those video games are often asymmetrical multiplayer horror games where, whether it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game or Friday the 13th, or any of those, they also did Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I'm very relieved that Saber Interactive is taking a much more refined approach in trying to honor Clive Barker's material, and so much so that they are working with Clive Barker in order to develop this game. So when I'm talking about honoring Hellraiser, I'm talking like they are not cutting any corners on this. They are going full on horror, gore, nudity, full frontal nudity, sex scenes, BDSM galore, and then of course leather demon dudes who are coming out of hell or heaven, depending on how you look at it, and they're not pulling any punches. In fact, it is so graphic, it is so intense, that of course the first question I ask the developers, I imagine everyone's going to be asking them, is, so, what is this game going to be rated? Because even if it was mature, they're pushing the envelope here, and it's TBD on what it's rated, and I asked them, how willing are you going to compromise on this, and they say they're going to push it as far as I can. Now, for context, to give an idea, the opening cutscene of the game, or at least the opening of my preview, was a full frontal sex scene where it features the main character, Aiden, and his partner, Sonny, going at it. And in typical Hellraiser fashion, these characters are trying, it's all about pleasure and pain. So these two characters are exploring the beautiful world of pain and pleasure. And they also just so happen to have the little cube, the infamous Hellraiser puzzle box that opens, gates to hell, where Pinhead and the Chatterer and all the other sexy leather demon people come out. And during this intercourse, they end up opening the gates, in which Sunny, Aiden's girlfriend, gets dragged into this otherly, helly dimension in which now Aiden must go in to try and find her. And while this plot has been explored in the Hellraiser films, the thing that I'm really excited that Saber Interactive is doing with this game is they're taking a lot of liberties to introduce a storyline that we have not seen done in the film. So in this case, when Aiden comes to after exploring this labyrinth, he finds himself in the clutches of something called the Scarlet Church, which is basically a cult of people who are trying to get into this other world. They're trying to get into this labyrinth, this pleasure hell. And well, that means finding people, killing people, torturing people. Some of it is consensual, and I really didn't get the full grasp of how it works. But you are suddenly thrust into a world where you are navigating this Scarlet Church, these cult followers who kill people for pleasure, who kill people for other people, and it's this amalgamation of art and pain and pleasure kind of folding over, and Aiden is forced to go through this world And that's where like the big survival horror element is pushed in. I was stealthing past people, silently taking them out. Also, Aiden is a ex-convict and part of a biker gang called Hellraisers. Yeah. And going through this environment, you are trotting around dead, mutilated bodies. It is graphic, it's brutal, but there's also a little bit of fun, weird levity to it. There's a particular scene when Aiden has to get a knife from a body to attack someone who is trying to get him. And while it's happening, as Aiden pulls the knife out, he realizes that the guy is still alive, but the dude that you're pulling the knife out of is like, oh my God, it's so good. And there's something really comical about like pulling a knife out of a guy who like clearly does not seem like he's gonna make it, but he's loving every second of it. And that plays into combat as well. So while you're actually fighting these dudes and fighting these cultists, they seem to get pleasure out of you actually trying to kill them. Who am I to judge? But the combat's pretty rock solid and simple enough. So you have your basic sort of dodge maneuver, but the interesting fold of it is that weapons will break over time, but depending on the type of person you're fighting, you might actually have to switch up your strategy. So I was fighting a dude who was completely covered in leather, so my knife wasn't quite getting into his flesh. So I had to switch to a baseball bat with nails to knock the leather off of him in order to then finally like take him out. But you're not only fighting these things. In fact, that is because you enter the labyrinthian, hellish world of Hellraiser where you must run away from the Cenobites. In my demo, I ran away from the Chatterer, who is my favorite of the Cenobites. He's just a dude with his teeth, and it was so messed up because you were running through this world that is completely shifting at all times. You actually have a sprint slide mechanic because you have to dodge like chains and booby traps as they're coming. And all while this is happening, you hear the teeth like chattering and like reverberating around you, and it was absolutely terrifying. Now, the thing that I didn't get to see in this demo is you eventually get your hands on the cube, which you can use as a weapon, which gives you magical abilities. So I only got to see them allude to it in the trailer, but I didn't get hands-on with it. I did, however, get to play with guns, and this is where the Resident Evil Village kind of gameplay aspect of it comes in. Saber Interactive is absolutely going full in on like the fantasy horror part of it, because you'll be in a BDSM club with beats blasting 1 minute, and then you will find yourself in a world with like zombies and other creatures, and that's kind of what reminded me of Resident Evil Village, as well as the crafting system. So you'll be crafting ammunition, you'll be crafting health, and all that jazz. There's also a currency that you'll find, and even though I didn't meet the characters who I'd be exchanging that with, they did tell me that it is lore accurate. It is things that you will be getting. They're items that are tied to the lore of Hellraiser, these shiny coins in which you can then trade in for weapons, other materials, as well as weapon upgrades. That being said, there is not a skill tree, however. That is important to note. Also, the inventory is like classic Resident Evil inventory system where you have to like shift and like more like Resident Evil 4 and Village in that way, which is A-okay in my book. Now, just to wrap up, a couple cool things. They did get Doug Bradley back, who is the dude who has played Hellraiser in all the films. So he is taking the helm to take his iconic, cool voice.
It thirsts for excruciating pleasure.
They were able to tell me that the game was going to be about 7 to 10 hours in length when it finally comes out. That being said, there is no release date. We do not know whether this is coming this year or next, but nonetheless, this game shot up on my radar as not just some licensed horror movie grab, but actually a game that could potentially be my most anticipated survival horror, probably next to Resident Evil 9 coming in the next coming years. So with all that said, video games have come a long way since Pac-Man. All right, see you later.